Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Care to Lead Executive Forum, where we're diving deep into how AI is disrupting industry. We've gathered a distinguished panel of industry leaders who are all immersed in this rapidly evolving world of AI. As an audience member, you're going to get to see a group of diverse leaders come together in real time to identify some of the best practices for leading this change. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of our guests. All of their full bios will be in the show notes. First, we have Jordan Silverman. He's the innovative mind behind Starfish, and he brings a wealth of experience in enhancing small business growth through technology. Sean Richards is a visionary in software development and digital transformation from Vincent. Chinmay Narukar is from Microsoft. He's an expert in leveraging AI for creating cutting-edge advertising solutions. Chris Campbell is steering DeVry University's IT strategy. And Maeve Quarine is co-owner and CEO of Foresight Factory, known for forward-thinking and predictive market trends. All right, now let's talk about what you as an audience can expect, which we promise is going to be a deep and engaging conversation. But before we dive in, I want to take some time to talk about the process that we're going to use, because this isn't a panel discussion. This won't be a ping-pong game back and forth between me and each of our guests. This isn't a set of interview questions, nor is it an open brainstorming conversation, but rather, we're going to have a structured conversation protocol in order to surface our individual best thinking and then use it to synthesize our collective thinking. It's a process that my team and I use within organizations to foster dynamic discussion on issues that all members of the team are facing. This protocol is called an all angles protocol, and we use it to get all of the angles and the perspective that each of these leaders bring to the table. Each of our guests today are thought leaders who care about today's driving question, and they've each agreed to explore this topic in more depth. So I'm going to ask each of the guests to stick to the process, and it's going to feel new and maybe even uncomfortable as it is highly structured. We always ask that participants follow the protocol because the process does a few very important things. First, it gives time for thinking and writing. It gives space for each person to actively listen and to actively share thoughts. Okay, so now let's take a look at the protocol. All right, this is what the protocol will look like. I'm going to pose the problem for you. I'll spend a moment or two doing that. Then I'm going to give each of you some time to write from your thoughts and your perspectives on this topic. Then we're going to each share your thoughts, and we're going to each ask probing questions of one another. Then we're going to do some more writing to synthesize all of that information. And then we're going to take our next steps and come up with our 3 best practices for leaders. And then we'll debrief on the whole process. With that being said, are there any questions from our panel? All right. I feel like they all look like, what is she getting me into? All right. So I'm going to just briefly kind of talk about the problem. You see, today, artificial intelligence is not just an innovative technology, right? It's a fundamental shift that's transforming every single sector. Yet, this rapid evolution also presents significant challenges for leadership. Today, our leaders are going to work together in a facilitated exercise to identify the answer to this question. What are 3 best practices that executives should know to leverage and lead their teams in the rapidly growing world of AI? Trust me, as an executive coach, I see executives struggling every day with how to lead their teams through this change because it seems to be happening so fast. As soon as they get their arms around a little piece of it, it changes again. So these thought leaders are going to help us come up with some best practices. The first step, our leaders are going to write from their own perspectives. They're going to reflect on this question from their own diverse industry perspectives. They're going to consider the impacts, the opportunities, and the hurdles that AI presents. You may find it odd as an audience that we begin by having them write, but there's a lot of science behind why we do this and why you should also consider it when you're leading team discussions. You see, it encourages participation, reduces bias and groupthink, and it creates an environment for expansive thinking. With that, I'm going to push pause here, and I'm going to allow my guest here about 7 minutes to just write their thoughts on this topic. Okay? All right. So next, we are going to welcome you all back. Thank you for taking the time to do that writing. Now we're going to share all the angles. Each guest is going to have an opportunity to share their viewpoint, enriching our discussion with a broad spectrum of insights from different sectors. And who would like to start off? I would love to hear. Let's let Maeve start. Let's let our fine women get this conversation started.
Loving it. After International Women's Day, a little solidarity. Cynthia, thank you. Super pleased to start. Let me start with 3 words or phrases that I think really stand out for us at Foresight Factory as just super important. And then maybe I'll expand on those ideas a little. The first word that comes to mind for me is inclusive, or maybe we could phrase it as human first. The second piece for me is all about pluralism and diverse thinking and using that when we deploy AI. And the third piece for me is all about battling bias, transparency, governance, security, and making sure that we use it in safe and responsible ways. So if I maybe just expand on each of those a little, I think the fear and excitement of how AI affects all of us in our personal lives and in our professional lives is absolutely real. Some of us are afraid, some of us are curious. There's a lot going on. And I think for us at Foresight Factory, it's all about humanizing how we do this. Our sector is incredibly affected by the development of AI. And I think the first thing I would say or encourage people to think about is, how can you bring it in so that humans feel completely included in that journey? One of the things I think we can do there is to live how we adopt and experiment with AI through the company values. So one of our company values is curious and confident minds. And so with that, we've really encouraged all of our people internally to openly experiment with and get involved with AI as part of their day jobs and as part of us bringing thought leadership to each other. So being really creative around that. Also having this principle that while AI can augment what they do as individuals and the company, it absolutely cannot and will not replace them. Some of what we do in terms of predictive market trends is, of course, taking a look at all the global signals out there that can affect businesses. You know, there are thousands every day coming through. Change is so rapid and distracting. And it's fair to say that whether they're strong signals, weak signals, disruptive signals, businesses really worry about this. One of the things AI can help us do is, instead of us spending all the time on the intelligence of what those signals are, it can pull that in at the touch of a button and really make us very agile and quick in terms of what we can bring to businesses. But what our humans do on top of that is they can contextualize. So instead of it just being intelligence first, it's all about why people will need to operate around those signals. What will it feel like to make decisions around those signals? How they make decisions in very complex worlds? How do they put hierarchies against the signals, and so on and so forth? So tons of ways in which we can, at Foresight Factory, help to augment actually how people do their day jobs, take out the repetitive bits, just the scanning elements, and really give smarter answers back to our clients. So human first and inclusive is super important. I think the other place I mentioned was all around pluralism. So diversity of thought is super important to us. At Foresight Factory, we have many different nationalities, ethnicities, cultures, persuasions of all kinds. That's really important to our organization. And we try to mirror that in our adoption of AI also. So whether it's mixing up which LLMs we turn to, or whether it's running thought experiments with lots of creative brainstorming through AI, we try to make sure we're never coming at the problem or the opportunity from just one single point of view. And so we really try to expand how we think that through, and we apply that, build on what each other is thinking, much like what we're doing today, actually, on this session with you, Cynthia. So we really want to embrace those diverse perspectives, and actually getting chatbots to, we've run a number of thought experiments where we can get chatbots to correct each other. I'm sure many of us in the room have tried things like this. It really works, and it really pushes people to think to the next level and elevates the thinking. And then if we come back to that, let's make it safe, transparent, out in the open. I think, our world starts with a simple tool like market research, and market research can be full of bias. Again, if it's written from a single country's perspective or a single individual's point of view, how questions get phrased, how we analyze the results, all of that. So we take that principle that we've always had in our organization, and we plug that into what we ask the AI to do and the way in which we set up the analysis around that. So conscious I've probably had my 3 minutes. Very happy to expand on all of those things, but hopefully that piece around human first, pluralism, and trying to take the bias out of the piece makes this exciting and hopefully useful basis for others' comments too.
Thank you very much for that. And then the rest of our panel is, just for our audience to know, I've instructed the rest of our panel to be thinking of probing questions that they want to come and ask to Maeve later. But first, we want to hear all of the perspectives. So we want everyone to have a chance to speak. And Chinmay, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for starting with humans first, people first approach. That's something I always appreciate, always think of when I'm doing anything AI or not. I think it's very important. But the few things that I wrote down from the point of view of how leadership should think about AI is, I think firstly, people or leaders need to think about strategic application of AI. And what I mean by that is a lot of companies, leaders in the space that I speak to, they are generally thinking about AI very tactically, even though they are talking about their AI strategy as such, right? Instead of thinking about how you can use AI or Gen AI tools at your disposal right now to increase your short-term revenue, making your profits look better for the next quarter, I think they really need to think about how we can use this new technology to deliver real value through our products to the world, right? And the business metrics will automatically follow. One of the business leaders I really respect recently went on stage and said, AI is not an autopilot, it's a co-pilot. Right. So instead of leaders coming and asking questions like, what are the things I can automate using AI? And how do I reduce cost? I think the right question to ask there is how do I empower my employees, my team, my company to basically use AI to assist them, right? And empower them basically to accomplish more. That'll automatically result in added productivity and the good business metrics that they're looking for, right? Once you have a real AI strategy, the next thing is how do you enable your employees to accomplish more, right? To personally and even just deliver value that you're trying to give to your customers through your products and things like that. So the way to enable is to educate them, to help them upskill, to teach them. You have to build this culture. It's not like one and done, right? Yes, you can help them with coursework or with coaching sessions and things like that. But this field is evolving so fast. Things are changing so fast, new things, new research, new applications, new Gen AI, LLMs, as we've mentioned, new stuff is coming out so often that you really need a culture of learning and upskilling that makes employees feel empowered, right? That drives away the fear. They feel included in this. They're not being replaced, or they're not just being augmented by something else, right? They're being assisted, they're being empowered by AI to do more, right? So I think the next thing is again, putting employees at the center and building this culture of learning and upskilling. And once you have that, what you have really is a powerful, skilled machine and people a company that basically can deliver a lot of change to the world, right? And that's where prioritizing ethics, responsible AI, transparency comes into the picture, right? Because what AI is doing to our world right now and just the pace of advancement is delivering a technology, a tool, I would say, that has never existed before. And this really has the potential to change the world as we know it. it is going to change the world around it. Like it's going to impact every single thing we touch, kind of, and like every single thing that touches our lives, right? So it is on us as AI practitioners, as AI leaders, to make sure that the benefits, first of all, we benefit from the things that we are building with AI, that we are delivering through AI, and those benefits are delivered equitably to everyone around the world. So I think those were the three main things that I would say AI leaders should focus on.
Thank you for that, Chimney. I appreciate it very much. And I'd love to hear now from Jordan Silverman.
Hey, everyone. So again, really excited to be here. As we've heard so far, AI is really just in the early stages, and I'm super excited to see where it continues to go. So for me, when I'm thinking about what are the three best practices executives should know, I think the first one is leadership has to take the first step. You can't just expect people to go out, do things. You really need to start at the top and show that leadership believes in AI and leadership is living these values. I could not agree more with what's been said so far about how important it is to be inclusive and bring everyone in. But if leadership isn't living those values and using AI and showing their desire to test and learn and innovate, the rest of the company is not going to follow. So the first thing is make sure that your leadership team is taking the first step. The second thing is just always talk about AI. Every single company meeting, whether that be an all hands or a department review, talk about AI. Share use cases, not just the successes, but also the failures. I think everyone here has played around enough with AI to know that it is far from perfect. It hallucinates. It makes mistakes. Sharing those case studies with your team is really important. Just to give an example, I remember the first time I used AI, I said, give me sources. And it gave me a bunch of sources. And I just sent it off to a client, and they were all just fake sources. And that was a huge learning on my end. And I shared that with the team so they could learn from those mistakes. So always talk about AI, not just the good, but also the bad. And then the third and final thing I would say is try to tie incentives to the team using AI to increase capacity and productivity. Bonuses, competitions, those are major things that you can use as a leader to drive people towards AI to increase the innovation rate that you're foreseeing. I'll give you an example. Something like a quarterly competition of who can come up with the best way for AI to solve X problem that the company or department is seeing is something that's a really fun way for leadership to motivate their team members. So again, the three things I would say are number one, leadership has to take the first step. Number two, constantly talk about AI and encourage everyone to dive in and use it. And then number three, incentivize the team to use AI to increase productivity and capacity.
Okay. Jordan, thank you. Chris, would you like to go next?
So thank you very much. I have to say that I'm 100% aligned with everything I've heard so far, and it's great. And Cynthia, thank you for inviting me to participate today. From our perspective, we have a very positive outlook on AI as it relates to inclusion and diversity. We think actually AI has the opportunity, although there's risk, it does have the opportunity to be a great leveling factor. We think that those that are underserved will have opportunities for louder voices and support, and the support of their voice through tools that are structured such to really level the playing field, make sure that all the diverse angles are reviewed and considered. So that would be not so much a leadership tenet, more just our perspective as we think about AI. As I think about leadership, right, first thing that comes to mind is we have to be curious. I do believe we have to lead first. The leadership has to drive, but we have to be curious. We have to be open-minded. And we really need to focus our energies at this point in the growth of AI on how those tools can amplify existing roles. It's important to understand that it's not eliminating roles. It's absolutely going to amplify, and finding the ways to amplify that, be it in Jordan's example of helping to find sources, for example, be they right or wrong, right? Or some of the things in the market analysis, right? Which is an area that we are doing a fair bit of exploration around, market analysis using AI. And it's really remarkable, I think, some of the bias that you see out there and having to think about it. And that really leads to one of our second tenets, which is really, I owe this to our current CEO, but we have to inspect what we expect, right? We have to trust the human factor or the context portion of the AI work we're doing. It's imperative, right? The context of those colleagues or employees that have deep knowledge of your industry, your customer, your fill in the blank, are the superpower to expose the real benefits that we can gain from this. And so, as I think about that, though, we have to be relentless in owning the outcomes, right? Which is kind of our third piece, which is, look, this AI, the way you leverage AI, the particular LM, the particular use case, whatever it is, you own the outcomes. The AI is just a machine. It's just a algorithm that's supporting you. You yourself, your company, your leadership team has to certainly own the outcomes, right? So that kind of leads back to my inspect what you expect. And finally, as leaders, and I think this is Jordan again towards you, we have to demonstrate through active exploration, right? We have to be actively using these tools, and we have to be sharing our learnings, right? Both with our peers, with our colleagues, with folks like yourselves, right? We're all going to get smarter, faster around this as this thing continues to evolve, but we have to demonstrate that kind of active discovery.
Thank you, Chris. And I am very excited to hear Sean Richards' thoughts on the topic of AI.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I love that last part, Chris, that you just said about sharing beyond your organization. I embrace that fully, and I've been attempting to do that quite a bit because there's so much I learn on a daily basis from people outside of our organization on this topic. Yeah, for us, one of the biggest highlights for me in this space is that I think one of the biggest misunderstandings about AI is a lot of organizations and a lot of people are on this spectrum of thinking that AI as a leadership, that you're either on the spectrum of thinking it has a very specific use case, or you're on the spectrum of thinking it does everything. And the reality is it's kind of in the middle. It does a lot, but it doesn't do everything. And it doesn't just do one thing. But as an organization, we really encourage the small to medium business all the way up to the enterprise-sized business to start thinking about what it should do for your business or what it can do for your business and what kind of outcomes it can have for you. But it's not that you should be doing it, but it's questioning whether you should be doing it. So don't just say, I got to do it. We have to be doing it because AI is here. But rather, why should we be doing it? What kind of outcomes we should be expecting? And make sure you know that as a leader before you go to your employees, your staff, and your colleagues and say, have to do it. We just need to decide how we're doing it. But rather, know the why first before you start trying to get your entire organization into this mindset that we have to do it or else. Because that or else statement puts the fear into, if I don't have something intelligent to do here, or I don't find something intuitive or by nature that changes the outcomes of this business, then I don't belong here. And that is just nonsense to feel as an employee, that if I can't come up with something creative in the AI space for my organization, that I don't belong here. So as the leader, I think it's important to make sure that that confidence lives, that the evaluation of whether AI belongs in your business has already been done by your leadership. And the reality is yes, AI has a place in most businesses because you could take advantage of like the basic AI tools, or you could really start taking the LLMs and implement AI into your own products and services at a large scale. We're a custom software development company at Vincent, and so we're the type that take large language models, and we figure out how to implement them into companies' core products and services. So we're looking at it at a bigger scale versus taking tools and saying, okay, just start using the tool out of the box the way it is. So we're trying to find very strategically or consultatively, like, how are you going to use this? To Chinmay's example, how are you going to change your actual outcomes as a business, not just in the next 12 months, but how are you changing the path of your organization going forward? And maybe changing the nature of your customers' lives or businesses by way of your product, right? So thinking strategically there. So just kind of setting that as the sentiment that we have, but just really kind of diving down into it is another leadership sentiment I'd like to share, is just making sure you don't over rely on AI. You have employees, you have staffing for a reason. AI is not going to replace your staffing. They're going to empower your staffing to make stronger, better decisions. If you're using better efficiency and productivity as your whole and 100% reason to bring AI into your organization, my opinion is that that's a misguided purpose for AI. It helps, but don't over rely on AI, because AI certainly complements, but it doesn't replace things entirely. It makes you stronger. It makes you allowable to do certain different, better things. But don't over rely on it, because it is still learning as well. It is still adopting its own methodologies. It is still trying to figure out the world, just as a new employee would be in its onboarding phase of starting at a company. So think about it that way. In my opinion, I would definitely agree in the sentiment of starting small, experimenting with areas of AI that are going to have impacts that both impact your customers' ability to get more value out of your product and service, but also change the nature of your own employees' dynamic. So what can make something that allows your employee to experience a better culture dynamic and or contribute to the organization? Just start small and then scale up. I would certainly advise to that. There are a lot of great ethical and compliance development discussions happening, both at the political level as well as the kind of government level. Is keep an eye on those as a leader, because they do have, of course, the opportunity to both strengthen and weaken your position depending on how you're choosing to deploy AI. So always keep an eye out for what's being developed in your country and your kind of government areas, so that you can ensure that what you're putting together and implementing will always have the benefit of positioning, to make sure that you're not going to invest to then have to then wipe that investment out with what changes may come. But I do believe that decisions are being made in a way that will support the continued growth of AI. But I guess lastly, probably the most important for me in all of this is really just thinking about AI as a opportunity for us to just, and I think, Chris, you said this probably, or maybe everybody said it in their own words, is just being curious to the way that the outcomes can shape our world in a way that we believe will always improve our experience, but staying skeptical to the nature of allowing us as humans to reflect that change. So allow it, be curious to allow it to allow change, but be skeptical as humans to make sure the change is managed. I guess that's how I would kind of end that statement.
That is excellent. And when a group of thought leaders come together to brainstorm and share and come up with best practices, one of the ways that they're going to do that is by deeper, thoughtful questioning. They want to challenge each other to explore solutions and strategies that may not have been considered originally in these conversations. So each of our leaders here today has shared some initial thoughts on AI, how it's impacting their industry, how it's impacting the globe as a whole. So now they're going to ask each other some deep, thoughtful questions and probing questions to dig deeper and come up with things that we haven't considered. So does anyone want to start with a question?
I'll start. So I'm curious. So one of the things that I've been avoiding telling my team and people is that AI is not going to replace jobs. I agree that today, as we stand, AI is a co-pilot. But are you a bit worried that, think about how far we've come in a year and a half, in 2, 3, 4 years? I don't know what the correct time horizon is, but over a certain amount of time, don't you think it's somewhat inevitable that AI is going to replace some jobs?
I'll jump in with a response, Jordan, if I can. I think what's kind of a phenomenon that I did not anticipate in our industry was that it would start by creating jobs. So we've actually hired more people and expanded our skill set and made it even more diverse since we started considering how we would use AI. And actually, I'm curious. Chinmay mentioned this, lots of us mentioned this culture of upskilling and how people have encouraged that. But one of the things that we did was, before we set up an AI transformation unit, we basically put a survey out to the whole company to ask them and to make them comfortable with the idea that, whether they had started using it, whether they'd never heard of it, whether they were proficient users, where were they at, so that we could start forming this strategy. All of that said, and that's proving to be super effective for us, but all of that said, we're also responsible for that same principle of co-pilot or augmentation, if you like, on behalf of our clients. And to your sentiment, I couldn't honestly say that would be true of all of my clients' businesses. And I guess the way we're trying to bring creative solutions to the table for them is to also think about how they can get ahead of it so that they are not going to be faced with thousands of job cuts, that they can think about where they would redeploy staff. And if they do that sufficiently upstream, then, they create the avenue before it becomes the inevitability, as it were. But that's unbelievably difficult. And, particularly in manufacturing jobs, for instance, but even in, as we know ourselves, white collar jobs and thinking about, quite sophisticated skill sets. So I'm really curious across the rest of the room how, I guess, the sort of, is anyone having to manage advice around transitioning and how bold we can be about, encouraging clients to transition into that new space, and what kind of tools can we bring to bear? So we do a lot of signal scanning around this ourselves, but super curious to know how you guys are managing that message, not just internally, but externally too.
So I'll jump in a minute. When we think about AI and its application against the workforce, right? And we think about the fact that, the white collar is actually a very vanishingly small percentage of the overall workforce when you consider deskless workforce and advanced manufacturing, and you start thinking about those types of things. And what becomes apparent to us is Jordan, yes, we may indeed over time see roles evaporate or transform so dramatically that they don't bear much semblance, right? And that may indeed happen over time. But when you consider the kind of half-life of technology and how that moves through the economy, we think there's a fair bit of room between here and there. And honestly, from our view, as we think about educating a workforce or upskilling a workforce, is that we truly have to help learners learn how to apply these advanced concepts to their universe, right? To their world. To how do I use AI to be more effective in crafting an email to a customer, or how do I, as a new leader, use AI to help me create a solid business case for a new whatever it is that we're proposing inside the company. And so I think that, yes, there's going to be, I love your comment about the fact that it actually created jobs, hands down. And it's created this real focus on, at least internally when we're looking to hire, on learning agility as a core skill, right? The core skill of being able to learn a new topic at pace and apply it to what you're working on is is something that we look for more than anything else at this point, right? And I think that will continue, right? And so, as you back that up into the workforce and into the youth of the country, right? Are we doing the right things to teach that kind of learning agility skill set? Because that's going to be super important as we go forward. But neither here nor there. We believe that the application of AI is the secret sauce today, and probably, for the kind of foreseeable future. Anyway, so that's our perspective.
So my perspective when someone says won't AI get so good that it'll take away all of our jobs is I like to say I'm an optimist, right? We humans have a few millennia at least of experience and track record of being innovative, coming up with ideas, building technology that makes our lives better, right? So we are the creative brain behind all of this, right? And I have faith in that creativity. We talked about building AI, building more intelligent AI to do more things. And some of the roles that exist today, whether we like it or not, I think the writing is on the wall that some of the roles of today are going to evaporate away. They're going to get automated away by AI because we intend it to be that way, right? We want AI to take over some of our responsibilities so we can spend our time, our energy. I think my mental bandwidth, right, can be dedicated to being more creative while somebody else helps me take on somebody else helps me by taking on some of the more menial or automatable tasks. So there's a couple of things that's happened. I think over here, I think Satya went on the Microsoft CEO. He went on a conference, I think, a few months ago, and he said that what Gen AI has given us, it's given a human interface that lowers the barrier to access of technology for a lot more people in the world. Previously, if you wanted to use your creativity with technology, you had to learn to use technology. You had to be a technologist, right? Now, what Gen AI is doing as it even gets better, it's giving a human interface where you can use your creativity without knowing how to program necessarily, not knowing how to be hardcore technologists. So I see two opportunities here. One is for technologists, for existing employees. As we build AI tools, how do we help them learn how to use them, integrate it into their workflow so it becomes part of their day-to-day, right? As a very specific example, right? I'm an engineer, I lead engineers. How do I help them integrate Copilot, GitHub Copilot or coding copilots or coding LLMs into the workflow so that it becomes natural for them? They lose the fear of is this going to take away my job to okay, now I can build bigger, better things with my creativity because the smaller things are handled by the LLM or the assistant, the copilot. On the other end are all of those folks who could not participate with technology because they were not technologists, right? People in remote parts of the world who did not have access to technical education, but had some great ideas about how they could make a difference in their community, benefit from access to some of these ChatGPT technologies, work with technologists to help them build their solutions and things like that. So I think we as AI leaders, AI practitioners, AI experts have a huge responsibility here, right? To drive in that direction where for existing employees, we help drive in the direction where they feel empowered, they learn how to use AI, they move on to more advanced roles as their existing roles get automated away, right? And that's going to happen because that's by intent. At the same time, how do we lead the way for more equitable adoption of AI by everyone else who could not participate before, just 5 years ago, before all of this existed? So that's how I see it. We're going to have roles, we're going to have jobs that we can't even think of right now. That's happened so many times in history. And we have to be responsible to drive that.
It's a really interesting nuance. So it's more so that AI will replace jobs, but the net effect is going to be greater for everyone.
But yes, and when you say when I say AI will replace jobs, I don't think people doing a particular job. I think AI will replace certain roles that people fulfill in their jobs today, right? And that's a good thing. We intend it that way so that humans will be able to take on newer roles as part of their jobs, right? Live more fruitful, productive lives, do more for their community, drive more satisfaction through what they do for the world in general.
Couldn't agree more. I think, people don't wake up and say, I'd like to do remedial, repetitive tasks every day. Not everybody wakes up and says, I want to change the world either. But I think, they don't want to wake up and do nothing or remedial tasks either. So it's somewhere in between for most people. And then, of course, there's the world change leader types that exist out there. And there's some pretty inspiring ones out there. But I agree with Jordan on the net effect. The net effect is what I think. There are not going to be major job losses as a net effect, but there are companies who have not evolved their practices for so long that they are having large impacts to the AI. For instance, those that are having big job losses right now, they could have very easily taken advantage of some of the interim technologies that existed. For instance, machine learning capabilities have existed for quite a while ahead of some of the newer AI technologies that could have implemented some evolution of their practices. For instance, replacing call centers with some machine learning, chatbot solutions. And now they have AI that replaced them. Okay, we took a call center of 800 people and wiped them out because AI does that now for me. Well, you could have done some machine learning chatbot solutions in the meantime and reduced that staff over the last 10 years if you wanted. But you chose to stick with an older solution and now replacing those. So it seems more dramatic now, right? But, that was a company's choice. And then the media, of course, exemplifies this as to be this huge AI caused this shift in narrative. But reality is AI widely is actually creating more jobs than it is, demanding loss of them in companies as a net effect. That'd be my observation as well.
Can I jump in with another probe? Cynthia, is that okay?
Yes, please.
I'm loving the discussion. I love this phrase, the net effect. Really echo everyone's comments on that. It just yesterday I don't know if any of you guys are fans of Yuval Noah Harari. I like to listen to him sometimes, and he was talking about the difference between consciousness and intelligence. And humans often conflate those two things. And if you think about AI, it is super intelligent. It's already more intelligent than we are, and it'll continue to get dramatically more so. But the one thing humans are always going to be really good at is being sentient and leveraging that consciousness. And all of you have talked about creativity in different ways, actually. And so I think, that consciousness, that ability to feel things, to empathize, I'm interested in everyone's view around what they're doing or thinking about in terms of that. Can AI help us engender more empathy? Can we be creative about that? Does the fact that it exists actually push us into even more human, empathetic behaviors? I'd love to hear the panel's views on that.
I love that question.
With any new technology that creates fear so much, right? Like because of just the lack of information around it for a lot of people, or like what it means and things like that. And when someone says like it can take your job away, kind of, we've had this like, computers are going to take your jobs away, like that kind of stuff. But when you see something on the scale that can imitate how we humans speak, how we converse, give an illusion of logical reasoning, it does make people question what the future looks like for them and for the world around them, right? At the same time, these technologies are also allowing us to connect with each other in ways that was never possible, right? So at that point in time, I think it's really important when you have a tool, a technology that's so impactful, you have to think about how we can, I would say, guide the direction of its development, where this technology, where these things are going, from the point of view of others. You have to like put yourself in the shoes of people who know less about this, people who fear this, so that we can change some of their perspective, get them on board, right? As researchers, specifically, we might know very objectively, no, there's nothing to fear about this, right? Like I think Andrew Ng, one of the talked about, like sometimes mentioned as the father of machine learning or something. He said, I'm more worried about overpopulation on Mars than I'm worried about AI taking over and killing us all, right? But he understands a lot of things about how AI works, what it means. it's not sentient, it's giving the illusion of sentience, right? But you have to think from the point of view of the rest of the world where it's creating fear, and you need to basically educate them. You need to show them, like, no, this is something you can use, right? This is something you can build on top of, right? It's not just like people who sound like experts and researchers and are there. It's all of us. It's something that can bring equitable progress to all of us together and individually, right? So I think that's where really thinking with empathy in mind is important to drive the direction of like how we are developing AI and how we are basically developing or driving the adoption of these new technologies going forward. So I think it's very important for like responsible adoption and just in general global progress. Like if we don't do that, we risk going in a slightly Orwellian direction if we don't take on this responsibility. That's my 2 cents.
One of the things that resonates with me in that question that you asked is just how we anticipate it influencing more of the kind of, empathy and kind of emotion that it might, I guess, that we either fear or maybe embrace depending on your mentality around AI. And one of the conversations I've been having with some folks is around this idea of kind of multi-dimensional sentiment analysis that we as humans only have a certain capacity to do at any given time. We can only absorb so much sentiment at one time. When you're reading body language, you're hearing voice, you're viewing someone, you can read what you read and you feel what you feel. And AI can do sentiment analysis in a lot of dimensions at one time, more than we can do, with the exception of how it makes it feel. So we choose, and we will always be able to choose how we feel from our sentiment, but we can only intake sentiment in so many ways at one time, whereas AI could probably process sentiment in a lot of different ways. It can hear the voice, it can read the words, it can see all that, and it can process it very fast. So I think it can take sentiment from a lot of things, input it, process it very fast, and do that much better than we can in large scale. But we still have to decide how it makes us feel about things. And so I think if we can harness that in a way where we take its ability to do sentiment analysis in a professional business capacity, or eventually even beyond business capacity, but in the social realm of things, but don't let it decide how we feel, allow ourselves to continue to control how we feel about what it's giving us, then we'll still be able to control the outcomes. And I don't think AI will ever replace how we feel. And so therefore, I just think we'll always be able to take advantage of what it does for us.
I have to stop us here so we can get into the next part of this. Although this discussion is phenomenal and it could go on for hours. You guys are bringing up a lot of very brilliant things. I'd love how we ended up from AI into empathy. That's just like amazing. And so now the next step, as we reflect on everything that our colleagues here have said, I want you to each, we're going to take some time to write and synthesize all the information that we've gathered here in this conversation today. And now we want to try to come up with some patterns or like what you see as emerging as a best practice. And then we're going to join back together after we spend a few minutes writing to come up and see what resonates. And if we can narrow it down to 3 practices, we really want leaders to walk away from this conversation knowing that they can implement. Okay, so you can take a few minutes now to write. Now that everyone has had some time to synthesize this information in an organization with an executive team, this is where we would be coming up with like, what are the next steps and who's in charge of it and how do we do that? How do we take action out of here? But for today's purposes, what we want to do is we're going to share some of the synthesis and some of the writing that these thought leaders have brought to us. And together, they're going to narrow this down to what they say are the 3 best practices that leaders need to know to leverage their teams and lead them through this change of AI. With that, Chinmay, would you like to start with this discussion?
Yeah, I think, really condensing what I learned from everyone in this session, like my top 3 would be like, firstly, be curious about AI, try things out. share your learnings, like, your successes, failures, the good things, the bad things, so all of us can grow as this field of AI is growing. I think the next thing that really resonated with me is inspect what we expect, right? So definitely, I would say don't just rely, but really drive the AI strategy, drive the work based on the context of your colleagues who have deep knowledge of the domain that your company, your team operates in. So, like, that's your real superpower, and take responsibility for the outcome that you're building with your AI products. And I left this for the last one, but I think it's the most important one, that, when you're driving AI strategy as a leader, be empathetic about how you do it. Think about how other people are going to think about it. Your employees are going to think about it, how it's going to affect them, how they can feel empowered to use it if you do it right. So think about all of those things. Be responsible in your use of AI, and be inclusive when you're thinking about the benefits or things that you're building with AI. Like, how do you make its use and adoption more inclusive? So I think that's definitely the most important.
Excellent. Excellent. Maeve.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so my top 3, listening to everyone, I'll start almost where our discussion ended. I can't remember who phrased it like this, but I love the coining. I think if we as leaders decide how it makes us feel, or how we want it to make us feel, that's just like a really good poster child for driving good outcomes, responsible and fair outcomes. And I was thinking about that. Actually, we all arrive in work first as a person, not as an employee. But, so how would we want this in our personal lives? How do we want our employees to feel? How do our fellow employees want to feel around it? And then finally, our customers. And I think, that makes me think about the augmented human. It makes me think about upskilling. It makes me think about what everybody said about making it accessible across the world. It makes me think about how we can use it to pioneer. And just to round that whole sort of sentiment off, I think we've all talked a little bit about fear and ambition, curiosity and feeling constrained. I think we're all looking for that Goldilocks effect. One of the things my CPO said to me recently was, we're all addicted to intelligence. Everyone in this virtual room is wildly addicted to intelligence, and we get so quickly overwhelmed by it. And actually, if a conversational AI can get us to the point where we feel what it's returned to us is just the right amount of what we were looking for, that is so empowering. So that metaphor of, just enough, that will help us feel great about it. So to me, empathy is where it starts. I really loved my second one. I really loved, Jordan, I think this came from you, the point about let's talk about it. Let's make this public. Certainly at Foresight Factory, we've tried to do that, but I can see so many of our clients have still got a organization-wide ban on AI, for instance. So, this is not obvious for people. As leaders, I think we need to be the conversation, and I think we need to make sure that we kill off any sentiment of, I don't belong in this AI room. So I think keeping it public and making it a topic of conversation all the time is super important. I think I'm actually going to stop at 2, if that's okay.
That's fine. That's excellent. I love these. Who wants to go next?
So just the thing that resonates with me, everybody said it, right? Being curious, experiment, and share, right? Like that's just, I think it's incumbent upon us as leaders. I think something that Chinmay said that a few times that resonated with me was continued education, and specifically, it may sound a little trite, but educate on what's real versus what's science fiction, right? I think we owe it to people to be clear, right, on that. The final thing is more I don't know, nobody really said it exactly, but what I came away thinking was just an acknowledgement that Gen AI and where we're at right now with AI is it's truly an amplification of the human experience. And as such, we all have witnessed the positives and negatives of that. And so I think active bias management, right? Actively considering and managing bias impact on how we leverage AI is is going to be just so critical as we move forward. So those are my thoughts.
Sean?
Yeah, I think first thing I'd say is just embrace a culture of innovation if you aren't already. Really think about what that might mean for your organization. I know it's said a lot, but just reflect on what it means for your organization and see how AI fits into that. And think about AI starting with value, as instead of it as a technology, but it as a value, to you, just like reflect about it is a technology, but what is AI as a value to you? And just really think about how do you not lock yourself into it as a technology, but what does it drive for your business, and record that in a way and memorialize that first, because then you can choose the tools that then help drive the business value there for you. I would then lead that into really think about how you create a dedicated team around this. Because if you don't have owners around this concept, it like all things that don't have owners, they fall to the wayside, and you'll lose sight of why you chose to invest in it or adopted it, and you won't. You'll if you don't have owners of the anticipation, the implementation of it, the use of it, it will fall short, and your opinion of it or your output of it will fall short as well. So I would definitely highly suggest making sure you have some dedicated owners to that. And then lastly, I would suggest just see it as a learning process. It is a technology that is continuously evolving. It is nowhere near its completion point, and it probably will never be considered complete. So take it as a learning process and be okay with making mistakes with it. Just toy with it, have some fun with it, take it as a learning. You'll try some things that didn't work, but you'll try some stuff that's going to work incredibly well for your business, and you're going to embrace it, and you're going to make that part of your business. But don't forget that it's a learning process. So be easy on yourself, be easy on your staff, and embrace it as a learning process in the end.
Thank you. Jordan, are you the only one left here?
I think that leaves me. I couldn't agree more with what everyone said so far. As a leader, it's important to lead from the front, but you have to thread the needle, right? You have to show everyone that it's okay to try things, but you need to do so in an extremely inclusive and open way, where you are not just saying this is what you do, but you have to say, go try things, go experiment, and just be really open to different ideas, different opinions, because there's no right answer when it comes to this stuff. And you just need to say, go try stuff.
So we got a lot of ideas here. Some of them are overlapping. If as a group, if we were to say, some of the things I picked up on that were overlapping was definitely, and we want to figure out how to word this as a best practice for the group, but decide how you want AI to make you feel in your organization. What does that look like? Is it the empathy or that's come up multiple times here? I'm curious, how could we word that as a best practice?
I think the way you worded it is the right way to say it without trying to put it into some different words. Decide how you want AI to make you feel in your organization, and then drive your leadership in that way.
Decide how you want AI to make you feel in your organization and drive toward that end. Another one that I found that was repeated here was the be the conversation as a leader. Does anyone agree, or was there something else that you think you picked up on more that was repeating?
Well, I think the piece that goes with that, Cynthia, is what everyone talked about too, which is experimentation and making that experimentation, endorsing that, encouraging that, accept that some of that's going to go wrong. I think Sean was talking about that. I think we can all identify with that. So yeah, I think making that experimentation accessible is super important. But it would be worse if we weren't experimenting at all. So
that was a much better way of saying exactly what I was trying to say there. So thank you for clearing that up, Maeve. And we need one more best practice from this group.
Well, I was just going to say, I think allowing AI to strengthen the embodiment of your company's core values, allow it to fold into your business's strengths and embrace it. It doesn't need to be the one all. Your company's core doesn't need to be AI, but allow it to strengthen what you are today.
AI works for you. You don't work for AI.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes tools can transform organizations. Sometimes they're just a tool.
Is that the less best practice is to remember that AI works for you?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. That was, I think, a very valuable discussion. I hope that you all found it to be as well. I would like to take just the last few minutes here that we have and do a quick debrief on this process, because this is a process that I encourage executive teams to use on the regular. Instead of just jumping into a meeting and everybody throwing things out there, it forces us to listen. It forces us to dig deeper. I would love to get your feedback on the process of the protocol today, because we want our audience to walk away with value, and not just in the AI, but in the leadership and the processes and how to get thought leadership out of your teams.
I think active listening as a principle is widely understood and narrowly practiced. So I love that you took us on a journey of that, Cynthia. And personally, I wrote lots down from each of my fellow contributors here, and I found that super valuable. So totally agree. Makes for deeper, stronger conversation.
I really like that you everyone speaks and then we summarize, right? I think that's something super important in these kinds of sessions where everyone gets their chance to talk, you listen, as we've said, and then you dive into it. I think that's something that at most sessions, someone speaks and then we just critique what that person said. And I think having everyone get their turn to talk and then we go through it is so valuable.
Yeah, I'm aligned with that. I'm appreciative of structure anyway. So I think anything that helps guide us and ensures that everybody's voice is heard. So to me, this was a good session. I appreciated the framework.
I'm always a huge proponent of anything that forces listening. I think the attention span of everybody, generally humans today, is so short that listening is one of the most difficult tasks that we have as humans today. And our ability to ask questions only comes with our ability to listen, to know what questions to ask. So I think this process allowed us to listen carefully and to know what questions to ask. And that facilitation of that was really nice to have.
Yeah, I agree. I think it really helped that we got some time to structure our thoughts down on paper, notes, whatever, before we articulated it out. And then all of us had a chance to speak and listen to each other. I personally feel like I took a lot of learnings from this structure format, from all of the co-contributors here. I think I wouldn't say I was blindsided to any of these, but just hearing those thoughts from everyone, I think I learned a lot that I will carry forward with me. So I think this format is definitely great.
So I want to thank you all for your time. And for anyone watching today, I hope that you're walking away with the example of thought leadership and the power of bringing thought leaders together. And Care to Lead our purpose is to help thought leadership get out into the world, help thought leaders, even in organizations, just get their thoughts out of their head and where they can make a difference. And I think one of the biggest takeaways I'm coming away with from this conversation today is that AI is going to allow our teams and our people to find their creativity again, because they're not lost in the mundane, everyday stuff. And I think that what can come from that creativity is just so exciting. So I want to thank you all for your time today. Thank you all for being here. I genuinely appreciate each of you.